first thing you need to do is cut out all the sugars. Because if you go into a fasting with your regular diet pattern, you're going to have a very nasty experience. You're going to feel very hungry. You're going to go through withdrawal from sugar. You're going to feel terribly hungry, sweaty. You may even actually have worse symptoms. So the first thing we got to do is, look, we explain to the patients that your body is not supposed to consume so much sugar. We consume about more than 20 teaspoons of sugar a day in one form or the other. So the first thing I tell my patients is, look, you need to get rid of all artificial foods. Sugar is manufactured. Sugar is artificial. Sugar is a poison for the body. You need to cut out all sugar, all processed foods. Processed foods. Anything that is made in a factory, anything that has a barcode on it is suspect. Anything that's been pulverized, anything that has been made into a powder, get rid of everything. You need to eat foods in their natural, whole form. And that's the first thing you do. So forget fasting right now. The first thing you're going to do is just change your diet. I want you to eat whole foods. So I have a chart in my office that's the anti-inflammatory diet. And it contains all the whole foods. I said, when you look at the food in your plate, you need to be able to recognize it. Yes, this is what this is. This is what this is. And they said, what about meat and chicken and fish? I said, no problem. As long as it is grass-finished meat, organic chicken, organic eggs, and you can have some turkey, but you must have vegetables in their normal, natural state. And first thing you need to do is do that. So get rid of all the bread, all the bagels, pastries, all the things that are coming in a box, spaghetti included, pasta included. I said, look, right now, just get rid of all those things. I want you to eat a natural diet. So eat as much as you want, but of the right food. And I want you to do that for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. No fasting right now. No fasting right now. So that way, they get used to that idea.
Yeah.
That I'm going to first just change my diet. And then after 2 to 3 weeks, then I bring them back inside and I say, okay, so now that you've been doing this, how do you feel? And they say, Doc, I really feel much better. Now I say, now you're going to learn to skip meals. So step number 2 is skip meals. Wake up in the morning. I'm not hungry for breakfast. Skip it. Come around to lunch, have your dinner. Next day, have breakfast, but skip your lunch. The next day, skip your dinner. So learn to just skip meals. And look, you felt fine. Nothing bad happened. You were perhaps a little hungry. You got over it by drinking a glass of water. Drink lots of water during the daytime. So I do that for another 2 weeks or so. See, I'm doing it gradually, just like your athlete. You can't go do your 5K right now. You first need to build into it. So for a couple of weeks, I make them just skip meals randomly. Then I sit down with them and say, now, this week, 5 days a week, I want you to have only 2 meals. And these 2 meals are going to be within 6 hours of each other. So that you're going to have 18 hours that you're not going to eat at all and only drink water. No calories in those 18 hours whatsoever. You can have water, black tea, black coffee, but no calories whatsoever. And they say, oh gosh, that's great. And they do that for about 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, Monday to Friday, 2 meals within a 6-hour window period. So they're 18 hours, they are fasting. They do that for 2 weeks. Weekends, I let them have fun because they're with their family. So I say you can have breakfast, you can have lunch, dinner, but no snacks in between. So most you're going to have on weekends is 3 meals on the weekends. Then they do that for another 2 weeks. Then I say, okay, now is when you're really going to start your fasting. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I want you to skip that second meal also. Now you're only going to eat 1 meal on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's it. The rest of the days, during the week, you're going to have your 2 meals. Weekends, you can still have your 3 meals. So I gradually get them into that. And most of the time, patients are able to do it this way. Yeah. When I try to make them go to once a day eating or time-restricted feeding within a 6-hour window from the get-go, my failure rate is much higher. They don't know what fasting really does. But once they understand that fasting is not just fasting, it is a huge new biochemistry. It's a whole new metabolism that you're bringing in. And then you talk about that metabolism and now how you can get that flexibility in your metabolism. Now you got their attention. So I think it's been basically we need people like you and Mark and other people that can talk about this and educate people that no, fasting is not just fasting. It's not just a boring subject. There's so much science behind it. And also the other thing is, traditionally we've been fasting as you know, in the Hindu religion, Buddhist religion, Christianity, and also in Islam, we do fast. And it has been linked more to the religiousness rather than the science, when actually there's a lot of science behind it. First of all, addiction. You get rid of addiction because we're addicted to eating in this lifestyle. We want to eat every 2-3 hours. So we get addicted to the foods, the patterns. We change our circadian pattern of eating and our hormones in our body. So the addiction has to stop. And that's one of the biggest impediments that I find in teaching people how to fast. So I want to get rid of that addiction. So that's one big thing. The second big advantage is what I call metabolic flexibility, that you're supposed to be using another part of your metabolism. So you're getting out of the glucose and out of the sugar, and now using another physiology, that there are other substrates that you can use for energy in your body. And that gives you a healthier and a better metabolic pathway. You can use one or the other. It's like having a car that can run on two different fuels. So, and that has a whole bunch of advantages associated with it. And the third thing is that once you start fasting and you start changing your hormonal status, now you get a whole bunch of health benefits: coronary artery disease, strokes, blood pressure, obesity-related diseases such as joint disease, degenerative changes, and even dementia. So you get all these advantages. So it's amazing what fasting can actually do for you. And when we look back at the history of it, we say, why didn't we do this before? Why didn't we really examine this before? So first, you got to do all this. You got to graduate. You can't just go to university. You first got to go through high school and get through all this stuff. So I make them go through all this and then say, okay, now you're ready. You're going to do a 3-day water fast. And then it's just water for 3 days. And now, then we get better results. If you are on insulin, this is very, very important. If you're on insulin and you're fasting and you're still taking insulin, you're going to get hypoglycemic. Now, that means that your sugar levels are going to drop because you're not taking in calories and you're taking your insulin. So you are going to be in grave danger of getting hypoglycemia, and you can get a seizure and you can even die or could get a heart attack. So when you are fasting and you're going to do a 3-day water fast, for example, you really, even the 24-hour fast, you really need to have a medical professional that is going to oversee that if you're taking medications. So what are my general advice is as follows. If you're on insulin, you really need to talk to your provider, because you should not be taking insulin when you are fasting. And even when you do the 24-hour fasts, you need to cut back on the amount of insulin. So what I tell my patients typically is that the long-acting insulin you can stay on, but the short-acting insulin that you're taking for meals, you shouldn't have, because you still need your background insulin. But the goal here is to get you off insulin. So I'll tell you right now, I've taken about 150 patients off insulin in the last few years. So they've come to me on tons of insulin. So I think that when you're fasting, you do need medical supervision if you're a diabetic and you're taking insulin. Now, if you're taking oral agents for diabetes, for example, then what should you do with those on the days that you're fasting? You shouldn't take them. You shouldn't take them if you're fasting for 24 hours or more. So on the 3-day water fast, I tell them don't take it. But they can take all the other medications. So they may be on medications for cholesterol or gout or anything else. Fine, you can stay on those medications, but nothing that's going to lower your blood sugar. So you got to be a little cognizant of that. And then same thing for blood pressure medications. You will notice that your blood pressure goes down when you are fasting. So watch your blood pressure. So what I typically do is 2 things. I tell all my patients, get a blood pressure cuff. You need to monitor your blood pressures on the days that you're fasting or starting this whole program. Number 2, if you're on insulin or if you're a diabetic, you should get continuous glucose monitoring, the device that you put on your hand. I think that's amazing, because that'll empower you to know that your symptoms you're having right now are not due to low blood sugars, and you can basically be confident that you're not hurting yourself, and you get more confidence. And yes, the sugar may go up because you didn't take your insulin shot. So it goes up from, let's say, 150 to 200 or 250. That's not going to bother me that much, because that temporary increase in your blood glucose level is not going to harm you that much, because it's temporary, and then it'll come right back down again. So if you look at the effects of glycation due to high sugars, that effect, that detrimental effect on your proteins through the glycation end products, is not as deleterious as having that high insulin level and inflammation in your body. So I kind of let the sugar run a little bit higher and make sure that they don't become hypoglycemic, because that's the problem. So when you are starting this program and you start skipping meals, it's a little bit easier without supervision. But once you start getting a little serious and you're only eating once a day or doing a fast more than 24 hours, I think you really need to have a doctor or somebody who knows a little bit about this involved in your case. And that's kind of hard these days because a lot of people are still not on board with this fasting issue. But it's a great question. I think that generally speaking, you do. Now, I tell you, I got a patient that came to see me from South Florida, and he was on his 83rd day of fasting. Only water. 83 days. Drew, I looked at this guy, and he looked amazing. And he felt amazing. And he didn't have all that skin, all over his face and under his arms and everything else. So, and that's because when you do this type of fasting, you lose weight, mostly fat, but also your skin shrinks. So it's a different type of weight loss than when you're losing weight by eating 5 small meals a day and doing caloric restriction. I've definitely seen a difference in the way the patients present. But this guy was 83 days, and I was shocked. I said, this is amazing. And so I have a blood lab, immediately did his electrolytes in the office, normal.
Wow.
CBC, normal. Are you on any medications now? No, I was on diabetes medications, I was on blood pressure medications, so he's on nothing. The guy looked amazing. So he weighed 385 pounds. He was down to 230 pounds. So I said, okay, so according to the scale, I want you to come down to about 190. I think that'll be the perfect weight for you. And he just called me. He broke his fast. So I told him to take some bone broth and broke his fast gently. And he's doing wonderful. Now, he's not going to go back to eating 5 times a day or 3 times a day. He knows what to eat, how to eat, and he's going to start eating only once a day. So when you're not consuming calories, right? When you're not consuming calories, the insulin levels obviously drop because insulin only is produced when you're taking in calories. So your insulin level drop. And I found through all the research that so what happens now is the body, through all its chemicals and changes, realize that, hey, I need an alternative source of energy. Well, guess what? You do have it in the form of fat because you stored it away for a rainy day. Well, the rainy day has come because you haven't eaten. So when you don't eat and you're fasting, now the rainy day has come and your body has to start mobilizing the fat stores. But the problem is that all of us are hyperinsulinemic. So long as your insulin level is high, those fat stores are locked away. You cannot mobilize them. But when the insulin levels start coming down because you're fasting, now those fat stores, because they get hormone-sensitive lipase and other hormones, as a result, the fats start mobilizing. The fats now come in the form of triglycerides to your liver. Your liver will start producing some ketones. And the ketones can be utilized by the body as an alternative energy source. So fasting unleashes a whole new metabolic pathway of energy production through ketones. And you and I do that, or supposed to be doing that, naturally because it's built in our system to do that. Because you are not supposed to be eating every 2 hours, and our physiology is such. It's we're about more than 10,000 years old. And our genetic engineering is from that time when you eat now and you may not eat again for another day or two. And therefore, during those times, you have an alternative source of energy. And we just didn't realize that. We thought there was only one energy source and it was all sugar, and glucose only. But no, there's this other pathway available to us. So what is the advantage of having that alternative pathway? Well, when you use that alternative pathway, you're getting rid of the fat from the body. So you don't develop the obesity that we're getting nowadays. But more than that, the body makes you stronger because you're going in that pathway. Why? Because the body wants you to survive. So when you're in a survival mode, you're going to come back stronger and better than before. Because look, if you don't have calories, You think you're just going to crawl into a cave and die over there and just become weaker and weaker and just, I can't think anymore, and you just crawl. No. Nature wants you to come back stronger, become brighter, smarter, stronger than before, go out and get your food so that you can get back. And that's what this ketogenesis is all about. This new pathway is not just providing energy to you, it's actually bringing you back better. Bringing you back better. So the research that I found is that when you allow this to happen, it's a kind of a hormetic stress that you're creating on yourself. Hormetic stress means that you're creating a stress on the body, which is going to bring you back better. So when you do this fasting, there's so many benefits. Number one, I'll just rattle them off basically. There's a thing called brain-derived neurotrophic factor that is released. And that makes your brain brighter, smarter. You can actually grow new cells and neuroplasticity as well, which is fascinating. We never thought that this was possible, that our brains can actually grow back. So brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And then when you do feed yourself afterwards, there's a release of stem cells into your bodies. These things don't happen under normal circumstances when you're constantly eating. So this stem cell mobilization is fascinating information. Growth hormone. During fasting, you get growth hormone. You get more growth hormone production during fasting than at any other time. So your growth hormone allows you to maintain your muscles and repair. That's fascinating stuff that's going on inside your physiology when you are in the fasting mode, which you wouldn't at other times. And then there's this thing called autophagy. And I know there's a lot of people talking about autophagy, and you know about autophagy, but for the audience, I'm just going to tell them that, look, when you're running out of fuel and substances not coming in, you're going to take all your intracellular redundant parts of your cells and say, you know what? I'm just going to use these for energy because I need energy, right? So under the circumstances of fasting and some ketone production, you're going to take your intracellular organelles that are redundant and you're going to basically package them into lysosomes and basically export them out of the cell so that the body can utilize them. Now, what you've just done is you've cleaned up your intracellular debris, as it were. And same thing with old mitochondria. You're going to get rid of your old mitochondria because the body is now saying, you know what, I'm out of fuel here in the house. My fire is getting down. Well, there's this old piece of furniture. I'm going to burn this old piece of furniture. That's what it's doing. It's getting rid of redundant furniture. Now, when you feed yourself again, those parts are going to be replaced. So the science is now showing that when you clean up your mess in your cells and then you do feed yourself again, you're going to get new mitochondria. You're going to get better intracellular functions, and energetics is going to get better in the cell. So I have found, especially right now with everything that's going on with post-COVID and the patients coming in with no energy whatsoever, and I tell them to do fasting, the energy gets better. And I said, why is that? It's because they're getting mitophagy. Their mitochondria are getting better. They're getting new, better mitochondria. So the fasting process is not just about losing weight. It's about changing your entire cellular mechanisms. And we're supposed to have that. That's what keeps us young. Our telomeres also get longer when we're doing this. They don't shorten so fast, I should say. So there are so many biochemical changes, Drew. It's crazy that we didn't take advantage of this pathway before. So everybody gets into a ketotic state at a different level of their fasting. It just depends on what your diet has been before, how much sugar you've been consuming in your diet. But let's say that like I eat once a day. That's what I do. So for me to get into ketogenesis very easily, I start spilling some ketones very quickly. By about 16 hours, I'm already got some ketones in my urine. So I know that I'm in that pathway. Others may take them a little bit longer, but then slowly it becomes shorter and shorter and shorter. So you start producing some. So what I'm saying is that you need this metabolic flexibility to become healthier, and to heal some of the bad things that have happened as a result of our lifestyle and diet.
And we've always heard that fiber is good for you, but nobody really knew why. I mean, is it just because it gives you a big poop? I mean, so what, do you have a big poop? How does that make you live longer? How does that lower your blood pressure? How does that decrease your chances of developing metabolic syndrome? We really don't know the full answers, but it is the fiber that is feeding the bacteria. That's one part of the story. That when you eat a meal that is full of natural fiber and different kinds of fiber, then that's the food for the bacteria in your gut. And then the bacteria in turn must be doing something for you. There are many factors: the bacteria crossing over, leaking of the gut, inflammation. It all seems to start with having a healthy lining. So you need to have a healthy lining, healthy bacteria, and then deal with the problems that these are all creating in the body. From the practical standpoint, right? From the practical standpoint, we've already made the inroads in this. We talked about eating the right kinds of foods. We talked about exercise. Exercise is very healthy for you. And we know that one of the reasons is it actually helps the gut bacteria in your gut lining. Sleep, bad circadian patterns affect the gut lining as well. It affects the porosity of the gut lining. There's an intimate connection between all these lifestyle factors, which we will go over in great detail. Each lecture that I'm going to do thereafter, from now onward, is going to be about half an hour long, and we'll deep dive into each one of these factors. How does sleep affect your gut bacteria and its lining, for example? How stress does it itself, and how that affects everything, and of course all the dietary things that I've already talked about, and whether you can actually change your bacteria. And eating fermented foods, for example, is that helpful? Are probiotics more helpful than fermented foods? Well, I'll tell you right now, it's the fermented foods. Probiotics can be helpful in some cases. And then we'll talk about gastric bypass surgery and how those patients are amazing because they have a complete transformation of their gut bacteria. And that's what's causing the sudden reduction in their weight, metabolism gets better, complete reversal of type 2 diabetes, inflammatory markers all go down, fatty liver also gets better. So these entire changes are occurring. We think that it's gastric bypass. It's all to do with the bacteria. So I'm tickling you all with the idea that it's really coming down to this.
So after you eat in a normal state, you produce a lot of insulin, let's say. Now that you've been down for a good period of time, let's say, I'm going to give you an example, 24 hours. Your insulin levels have been low. Now you eat that next meal, you're only going to make this much insulin. You're going to make a much lesser amount of insulin. So your body is going to deal with that meal differently than had you eaten in a fed state. So eating after a fast is metabolized totally different than eating in a fed state. It's much more forgiving to you. And what's going to happen is that you'll produce less and less insulin even in the next few days after you've fasted one day. Look at the rewards I'm telling you about. You ought to diet at least one day where you don't eat anything because it'll give you a sustained benefit for days because your insulin sensitivity is going to be improved.